So we're going to take some time to dive deeper into layer masks and explore some of the possibilities here. I know at this point you're already aware of the existence of layer masks, but what we're going to do now with these three files is to try and open things up a bit, give you a chance for some creative exploration using layer masks, because they're definitely something that you're going to want to exploit throughout your use of Photoshop in a lot of different ways. So I'm going to give you some examples, some ideas of how you can use tools in conjunction with layer masks. They're going to be kind of quick, and we're going to jump from place to place. So try and keep up, or if you need to rewind, that's fine. But yeah, these should be very useful to you in your creative exercises, as well as pretty much everything you do in Photoshop when it comes to understanding the possibilities. So I've gone ahead and I've opened up three different files that are included in your folder, Surfer 1, 2, and 3. All right. One of these is Surfer 3 is a JPEG. The others are Photoshop files, but they should all open up inside of your copy of Photoshop, whatever version you happen to be using. And I've cascaded them in my version of Photoshop. If yours is different, then that's fine. It doesn't matter. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new file in which to bring these separate files into as layers. So how do we do that? This is something we do a lot in Photoshop, so let's talk about it. I'm going to go to File, New. So this is the File menu, and this is to make a new file. Command-N is the keyboard shortcut, but File, New, and here's the dialog box that should come up, something like this. All right, so I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to call it Layer Masks. Very simple, since that's what we're exploring. The size is going to be in inches, so make sure you're set to inches. I'm going to do, on the width, let's go with something fairly large. I'm going to go, let's go with like 12. And then on the height, let's try, I'm going to make this kind of tall, so maybe 18. But I'm going to keep the resolution low. Rather than 300, which would be print resolution, I'm going to go down to 72 for screen resolution because this is an exercise. And I want to keep these file sizes nice and small for us. RGB color, 8-bit. Color depth is fine for this. But if you're working with, your raw images, then you would be up around 16. But that's another story. White background. All right, we're going to click OK. If you need to pause this to look at those settings, feel free. Click OK, make your new file. Looks rectangular like this. Now I've got 4 cascaded files all together. So here's a little trick with Photoshop. When you have these nested files all open, in this case, what we're going to need to do is a lot of dragging and dropping. So I'm going to go to the Window menu. I'm going to go to Window. For the pop-up list, I'm going to go down to the place where at the very top it says Arrange. If yours is a little slightly different location, that's fine, but it should be under the Arrange menu under Window, and I'm going to choose 4 up because I have 4 files, so that's the only reason. And in this case, it's going to evenly distribute all 4 files in my workspace. Makes life a little bit easier to do a drag and drop, for example. So I want to drag and drop these 3 files into this white file. So I'm going to start with this upper corner, and I'm just going to take this background layer from Surfer 2 and drag it up there. It doesn't matter which Surfer you do first. It really doesn't. We're just doing this one by one. So here's Surfer 3. I'm going to drag the background, and I'm going to stick that in the file. And then finally, Surfer 1 over here, I'm going to drag this and put it in as well. All right. Now, I no longer have a use for the Surfer files. I'm going to go ahead and close them out by hitting the X. And this will let me focus on the one file here. I'm going to switch to the Move tool, upper left-hand corner there. And now I can go to sort of place these around. Now, the Move tool has an auto-select feature if you want to exploit this. You can turn it on, and when you have simple setups like this without too much overlap, it works pretty well. You can click and grab an image and just drag it. The problem with this tool comes when you have a lot of stuff going on, and it can be Photoshop often fails to select the right image, and it can cause more problems than it's worth. So I'll let you decide if auto select is right for you, but you can give it a try. I'm going to turn mine off, but a lot of beginners, I think, find it easier to just grab the layer first and then move it. Okay, so I'm moving layer 3, layer 2, and then layer 1. And I'm just positioning these around to give me a little bit of breathing room. This one should probably come up. So that works pretty well. And layer 1. Good enough. All right. So what I want to do now is to explore some different layer possibilities with layer masks. So I'm going to start at the top. Whatever surfer you have on top, that's fine. Just go with that. So here's my layer number 3. And let's take a look at what you can do in regards to photo edges and using the filter gallery for that. And let's first off talk a little bit about how to set up a layer mask when you have the need to do a photo edge. A photo edge is something that should affect only, I'm going to zoom in because I'm really focusing just on this one image. A photo edge really is designed to affect only the outer perimeter of the image itself. So if I'm trying to set up a photo edge layer mask, it makes sense to go ahead and to begin with a selection area based upon the size of the photo. So in other words, if you look at, if I turn these other layers off for a second, if you look at just the top layer by itself, it's surrounded by a lot of white space, okay? So it's by a lot of empty space. And if you see, my preview here on layer 3, you can see all this is checkerboard, which means it's clear, it's transparent, and allows me to see through to the other underlying layers. To load this as a selection, when you have a transparent layer like this, you can use this keyboard shortcut by command clicking on your thumbnail, and it will load it up as a selection. You see the marching ants there, just like it did when we worked with channels and we loaded up a channel as a selection. I command clicked on the thumbnail. It works the same way, but this trick only works when you have transparent layers with this checkerboard pattern. If I were to try it with the background layer, it would load up the entire file as a selection because there's no transparency for it to base that selection on. All right, now that I've got this loaded up, if I were to go now to the layer mask button, this button here with looks like a flag with a circle in the middle. If I were to click on that now, it would base the layer mask upon the selection. So I'll go ahead and do that, and you can see that everything turned black except for this little white rectangle where this file is exactly. So the masking is pretty much invisible, though, but it is masking everything that might else be on that layer 3. So if that doesn't make much sense to you, let me show you something. We have this little chain in between the layer and the layer mask. Okay, it looks like this. There it is in the middle. And you can click on that to deactivate it. What that does is it separates the scale of the layer mask from the image itself. In other words, normally when this is on, if I were to scale the layer mask, it would also scale the image and vice versa. So they affect each other. And so that way you keep continuity between your layer mask and your layer. But in this case, I want to crop it a little bit. So I'm going to turn that off and I'm going to select the layer mask. How do I know the layer mask is selected and not the layer? Well, if you click on these, depending on your version of Photoshop, you'll get these kind of corners. You'll get some sort of halo that tells you which is selected. And in my case, it looks like kind of a white halo, but yours may look a little different. Just click on both and you'll figure it out. But in my case now, I'm selecting my layer mask, as you can see, and I'm just going to use the move tool here and just scale these corners down. And look what happens. You see how I'm able to crop the image just by scaling down that rectangle? Because I separated the two. Now, if I were to have linked the two, I have to check this to accept it, hit the checkbox, or hit the return key. I'm going to accept that change. But if I were to have linked the two and done the same thing, you see how they coincide with each other? They affect each other, so they stay proportional. I'm going to not accept that because I don't want that change, but just to give you an example of what the linking can do. All right, but now you see that the image is actually larger than what we're seeing, but because I've downsized the layer mask, I've actually cropped that area inward a little bit. But I've done it non-destructively. The information is still there, and we're going to see that in a moment. So I've still got the layer mask selected. Let's have some fun. I'm going to go to the filter menu, and I'm going to open up the filter gallery. Filter gallery. All right, this filter gallery has layers on it itself. You can stack these. You can play around with them. They all have adjustments that you can make. But there's a lot of different categories. And you have artistic, brush strokes, distort. You might have some more on yours. But I'm going to go ahead to the distort area and just try a few. Let's try glass, for example. And look what that did. So you can play with these settings, the amount of distortion to see how much of that fade you would want in your image. The smoothness of it, and you can get a very different look. Now we got kind of a raggedy look, almost like a postcard that's been, I don't know, cut away, or maybe it's frayed a little bit around the edges. And then I can click OK to accept that. And look what it did. See, it distorted that edge, so it gave me that look. So that data that was still there, all I did was just modify the layer mask so it looks like that using the gallery, filter gallery. So you can stack these as well. You can come back and you can go back to your filter gallery and you can open it up once again and try other features. So now I've diffused it on top of that, but you notice the other effect is still there. I can try some of the sketch features, and again, some of these you'll have to play with on the sliders to just see different looks, different stroke pressures, and it's kind of fun. It takes a long time to really get it exactly the way you want it, or if you have something in mind, you may have to play quite a bit with it, but it is fun to explore and see the possibilities. Here I've got I can add a little bit of shadow and texture to the interior of the photo. Here's the torn edges, so I can add that look as well and kind of fray it. So it's fun to play with this stuff and just see where it takes you, but it gives me definitely a different look to the edge of my photo. So try that out. Try some different filter gallery looks. You can stack them. You can explore the filter gallery in more depth if you'd like. But for the first layer, that's kind of what I'm asking you to do. Build a layer mask and explore the filter gallery and try some different looks. There's no right or wrong answer. I'm giving you creative license to do as you please, but I want you to explore the filter gallery on layer 3. Layer 2, we're going to come down to the next image. And let me just move this out so we can see it better. And we'll try something a little bit different. So last time around, we simply scaled the layer mask, but there's other ways you can do this. So I'm going to load the layer as a selection again by command clicking it. Use that shortcut to our advantage. And this time I'm just going to modify the selection before I even make the layer mask. So let's try that. I'm going to go to the select menu. And under the select menu, you have this option called transform selection. Okay, so what it lets you do is transform the size of the selection, much like we did with the move tool earlier in this lesson, but now I'm doing it to the selection itself before I even make any sort of mask. There we go. Now I'm going to accept that change, hit the check mark, or hit the return key to do that. And now I'm going to make my layer mask. Add my layer mask. Click the button, and bingo, it crops it, based upon the selection, of course. So just another way to do the same thing. Photoshop's good at that. All right, now let's explore some possibilities by taking a look at perhaps using the brush. So let's take the brush. And under the paintbrush, you've got a lot of different options, okay? I can adjust the size, yes. I can adjust the hardness of the brush so it's got kind of a soft edge to it, a feather to it. And of course, the maximum hardness, the more straight that edge is going to be. So if I click and start painting with it, let's just see what happens. So first of all, before I do that, I want to show you that I'm selecting the layer mask Once again, we're not painting on the layer. It's a big difference. If I paint on the layer, I'm going to destroy the pixels. I'm painting on the layer mask, which is a non-destructive process. All right. Now, also be aware of what colors you have selected. My foreground color is currently black. My background is white. So if I paint black, I'm going to be painting mask. So let's see what happens. There we go. I just painted a mask, and you can see that. There's what it looks like. I just painted a mask utilizing this brush. And in my case, the brush was 75 pixels, and it was 100% completely hard, so it basically had a sharp edge. If I turned the hardness down, it's going to give me a feathered edge like this. So the brush size is the same, but the hardness factor changes the feather. All right, so just be aware of that. All right, next up, I'm going to put this kind of back up where it was. And the brushes themselves, there's a lot of different options built in. Like you have some of these more artsy type brushes, which also can be adjusted. Notice that there's no hardness slider on this particular brush because that's the way it was built. But you see I can kind of just erode the edges and scrape away at them. And keep in mind with the brush, you also have the ability to change the opacity. So I can drop this down to 50% and kind of gradually scrape away at this. So it's a more organic process where it happens gradually. But because I'm doing this to the layer mask, and here's the layer mask, that's what it looks like. And you can see I've got black, gray, different areas of transparency. If I ever do something and I go too far with it, all I have to do is flip the black and white. And now if I paint white, I'm going to paint back the image. Okay, depending upon my opacity levels, it may take me a while to get the image completely back. But if I want to go to 100%, I'll get it back right away. And I'll start painting back using that brush. So I can get a very distressed look without, losing the image or worrying about destroying the image because I can always get it back. So you can kind of build up your own edge here, go beyond the borders because again, we cropped it. So in addition to the paint brushes that come standard, come up here to the top. And in this little rotary wheel, you can click on this menu. And wow, it's kind of scary and you got all these options. But at the bottom, the very bottom section, are all of these collections of brushes. So you can load these up to your heart's content and explore these. Say, for example, natural brushes, which will add, it's going to ask me, do I want to append these or replace them? I'm going to append them. When I choose append, it adds the brushes as opposed to replacing brushes. So that's, again, a non-destructive process. So with this, I can take a look at some of the different types of brushes it gives me, some different looks. Again, you have to scale these up to the size you want. But let me paint black so you can see what I'm doing. There we go. Let's try some of the other strange concoctions they've got in here. But these, you notice they give you more organic flow. But here's like a leaf. It's kind of interesting. I can create a leaf, or I can drop down the opacity once again and just kind of fade the leaves on there and, what have you. It's kind of just sprays them everywhere. But you, again, can adjust the size. You can adjust some of the other features of the brush as you go forward. Try different brushes out. And again, if you just go too far or you want some of your image back, just switch black with white and adjust your opacity settings and you can bring the image back. So go ahead and explore this. Try and create some interesting photo edges with paintbrushes and just kind of build your own photo edge with it. You don't want to go so crazy that you bury your photo in it, but you can come in and just explore, and I want you to try different things to see what happens. See what kind of results you get. All right, so that's the paintbrush option. Now for the last version of the layer mask exploration, we're going to take a look at paintbrushes once again, but in a slightly different way. One thing people don't realize Photoshop can do is it's actually very, very easy to build your own paintbrush. So how does that work? Well, let me show you something. Let's say I want to make a paintbrush out of a word. I can actually take the text tool, and I'm going to choose black for my color. And you can choose whatever font you want. I really don't care. It's up to you. I'll choose this sort of script font here. I'm going to write the name of this beach here, where the photo was taken. And it's when I start typing, it's going to put the layer wherever I had selected it. So I'm going to cancel this because I wasn't paying attention. I had this layer selected. I really want this at the top, so I'm going to go to the top there. And let's try this again. But again, I'm choosing black, and the size is 72, which I can scale later. But let's go ahead and just type this out. So what I'm doing is I'm typing using the font of my choice with the text tool and creating a brand new text layer. And in the process, hopefully I will get something I can convert into a brush. But by default, depending on your version of Photoshop, the color that's the foreground color will not automatically become the brush color. So you will have to go in some cases to the panel of the text tool and adjust the paint color on the actual options panel, which if you look at my copy of Photoshop, there it is. You can see my mouse. I have to change this to black, so, or whatever color I want this to be, but I want this to be high contrast, so I'm going to go with black. All right, so let's try this again. Now I'm typing out my word, and the spacing is not what I'm looking for. That's too far spaced out. So I'm going to make an adjustment to this by bringing up my character panel. Here's the icon for that. And I'm going to change this tracking. So let's bring this down to a more normal number like 10. That looks better. That's what I'm after. Okay, so Bolsa, put a space. Chica. Maybe you've been to that beach. It's not far. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the checkbox to accept that. And now I can take my move tool. Here's my new text layer named after the text that I've just typed. And I can move this around to a nice white space to free it up a little bit. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the rectangular marquee tool. And with this, I can draw a rectangle around this bit of text. Like so. And once I've done that, I need to convert this text element into a bitmap graphic. So I'm going to go and do that real quick. So let's just change this. And under the type menu, I'm going up to the type where it says type. Go ahead and just choose the option to rasterize the type layer. Rasterizing means you're taking a vector-based layer and converting it into a pixel-based layer or a bitmap. All right, you notice it looks different now. The letter T is gone, and now it's a graphic. So now I can go to the edit menu and choose something called define brush preset. Okay, define brush preset. Now, even if you have an older version of Photoshop, this should still be there. This feature has been around a long time. So click that, and it's going to bring up this dialog box saying, what do you want to name the brush? Well, it makes sense to call this Bolsa Chica, so let's do that, Bolsa Chica. And there's what the brush is going to look like. That's the size of the brush, 238 pixels. Here we go. Let's click OK. Now, I no longer need this layer. I can throw it away. Or if I want to be less destructive about it, I can just turn it off. It's up to you. I'm going to deselect. So I'm going to select, deselect, or Command D for short. That deselects that rectangle. But now look what happens when I go to the paintbrush. If I go to the paintbrush, the first paintbrush I see is my new paintbrush, Bolsa Chica. Okay, so I'm going to paint with it. And I can actually use this like I did the brushes earlier. So I can come down to layer number 1. And that is, you can see it's all ready to paint. I'm going to go to this layer and I'm going to make a layer mask for it. Okay. So once again, I'm going to hold down the command key, load this layer as a selection. But in this time, I'm not going to shrink it. Well, let's do it. Why not? I like to use these excuses to showcase different ways of doing the same thing in Photoshop. So here's yet another way you could do this. So I'm going to go to the select menu, and here's a new option. Instead of transforming it, we can also modify it. I'm going to go to contract, and I'm going to choose an exact number. I'm going to choose, this is a great way to do it when you don't want to freehand things, you want things to be exact. So let's try 25 pixels. Click OK, and boom, we just contracted our selection. And so now I'm going to make the layer mask happen, click the layer mask button, and boom, there we go. All right, there you can see my new mask. And here's my paintbrush. I'm going to go ahead and paint black, and the opacity is 84%, so I can kind of just gradually build this out. And you can see that is my little rubber stamp with my word on it. How cool is that? And it's non-destructive. Again, this is something that's only being painted on the layer mask, so it's 100% non-destructive. Fun. All right, so does this work with anything? Okay, in other words, can you take a logo and do this? Yes. Anything that's a bitmap in Photoshop, you can do this to. It works. It's fun to do. And you can basically make a custom paintbrush out of any bitmap shape on Photoshop. It tends to work better if you have high contrast situation like we just had, where we had black lettering on a white background. But yes, it does work, and it's fun. So these are 3 different things I want you to explore with layer masks. But like I said, there's no right or wrong answer here. I just want to see you use some type of custom brush that you build for your third layer, or in this case, layer 1. For the middle layer, we used a paintbrush. You can use any paintbrushes you want in your paintbrush menu. And for the top one, we just used the filter gallery. Okay, so 3 things you can do to explore layer masks and give you some practice. Save your file and turn it in with all those layers intact, of course, and the layer masks, obviously. I'm going to be looking at those. And that'll be what you turn in from this one. We'll see you on the next lesson.